Hello and good morning, all of my beautiful intuitive butterflies, and welcome to Monday, September the 5th. I am really hoping that everything's going to work okay. I hope my audio is okay. Honestly, I logged in 6 times this morning to try and get this video to work. So it is being posted a little bit later than it would normally go up, but hopefully everything's working now. So let's get started with a cleansing and clearing. Let's light our candle. We're using white today. And get some sage going. I did sage everything this morning, and yet despite that, we still had technical problems. So, all right. Let's cleanse and clear everything. Cleanse and clear our 3 decks and stones we're going to use today. Cleanse and clear me. Maybe the problem is my energy is a little weird today. Who knows? It's a Monday. Let's call in the directions, the east, the south, the north, and the west. And we call in the 5 elements today. The earth, the air, the fire and water, and of course the ether that surrounds all. All right, so this week for many people around the world is the first week back to school, back to work, back into routine. Sorry, just adjusting things here because we've got smoke everywhere. All right. So this is the first week back for many, back to school, back to work. Great summer vacations behind us, lots of great memories, especially after what's happened in the last couple of years. So I think that a lot of people were able to get back to some semblance of normalcy, unlike the summer of 2020 or the summer of 2021. So let's hope that this fall and winter is beautiful for everyone. I think in the next week or two, I'm going to do some spreads, some card spreads, and some videos with projections out for the remainder of the year, for the remainder of September, October, November, and December, through into what people can expect. I'm still kind of gelling that in my head as to what that's going to look like. I don't want my videos to look like everybody else's who are doing predictions. You know, there's certain aspects of what I do that are going to look like other people's, but you know, my skills are unique in comparison to a lot of other people's. So hopefully I can produce some very accurate and enlightening predictions for everybody for what the remainder of 2022 holds for everyone. So without further ado, let's come back into the moment right now and let's see what the next week holds for each of you. So this week we are going to use a piece of pink quartz. I think some of you have seen this before. It's raw pink quartz. Oftentimes it's said to resonate with the heart chakra. So if you are drawn towards this stone, then you will be having your cards pulled from deck number 1. Second, we have a piece of smoky quartz. So if you are drawn towards this little tiny polished piece of smoky quartz, then I'll be pulling cards from deck 2 for you. And if you are called towards this quartz point, then we'll be pulling cards from deck number 3. So just take a moment, take a couple of deep breaths, and determine which deck of cards, which stone you are most drawn towards, the pink quartz, the smoky quartz, or the quartz point. Take a moment, go within, and then we will begin. Again, these readings, these predictions, they are general guidance. So take what resonates with you, and that which doesn't, it was a message that was meant for someone else. Okay. All right, so let's get started. Those of you that were called towards this piece of, unfortunately, there's so many other kind of pinks in the area. It's hard to see that this is in fact pink. And we're having a little difficulty with focusing today, but as I mentioned, electronics today. All right, so for those of you that selected the rose quartz, your messages will be coming from the Spirits of Nature Oracle deck. And let's get started. All right, let's provide some guidance on top for those people that selected this one. You know what, there's a card there. That was a little bit unusual, and then it stuck out again. All right, so guidance is the top card. The bottom card will be your shadow. Ocean waves. Okay. Ocean waves. So for those of you that selected the rose quartz this week, your guidance this week is to pay attention to ocean waves. Now, a lot of you might be saying, hey, I don't live near the ocean. Why am I going to pay attention to ocean waves? Okay, there's a couple of different messages here with ocean waves. This week, you are being called to pay attention to the rhythms that are happening in your life. Okay, waves have a very rhythmic nature. They roll in, they roll back out. The ocean itself also has a rhythm, right? It's got tides. The tide comes in, the tide goes back out. So this week you are being called upon to really, really pay close attention to what types of rhythms and cycles are happening in your life. Are you noticing that when you get up on a Monday morning, you immediately fall into that, oh God, it's a Monday type attitude. And then by Friday, you're kind of in that party mode. Woohoo, it's the weekend. And you might be noticing that these certain rhythms are either serving you or they're not serving you. Pay attention to that this week. The other thing to pay attention to is, as we know, these rhythms that happen in the ocean happen as a direct result of the moon and her cycles. So, you know, there are also some people that ascribe to or subscribe to the thought or the theory that it's not just the moon that influences the ocean, that other planetary bodies could potentially also be affecting us on our planet. And I want to mention and bring up that Mercury goes retrograde later this week. So that also affects all of us, which brings me to the other really, really important message for those of you that were drawn towards this card. And that is, this is water. Water flows. Water flows in, water flows out, water molds itself to its environment. So if you pour water into a large cup, then it becomes, you know, it molds itself to the large cup. If you put it into a little tiny test tube, it molds itself to that. So the other message for you this week, those of you that had selected the rose quartz, is to go with the flow this week. Allow yourself to be adaptable and changeable. Right? So what can happen is sometimes we get caught up in rhythms that either serve us or don't serve us. But the other thing that can happen is that when we notice that a rhythm or a cycle is no longer serving our highest good, and we attempt to make the change, there is resistance in ourselves. And even though we know that we're making that change for the better, we still bump up against ourselves. We bump up against that resistance. And this card is asking you that as you recognize and acknowledge the ebbs and flows and the rhythms in your life this week, when you decide that something is no longer serving you and you decide to make that change, remember to go with the flow a little bit. That doesn't mean necessarily going with the flow of what used to work for you in the past and accepting that. What that means is that as the universe begins to assist you in changing, some of that's going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And as that feels uncomfortable, remember water. Remember to allow yourself to change and flow and fit into the vessel that's being created for you as you create change in your life. Okay, you may be fitting back into an old vessel because maybe something from your past was working. And I'm picking up that for a good few of you, you're being called towards repeating something from the past this week and fitting yourself back into an old vessel. It's kind of like slipping back into an old pair of slippers that just fit. They feel good. And so for some of you, you're going back into that. But for others, for those of you that are looking for change, big change. In fact, I have had several people this week reach out to me and go, oh my God, midlife crisis is hitting. What do I do? And for those of you that are perhaps facing major changes, and we are facing major changes, our world is changing right now. If you want to dig a little bit deeper into that, by all means, book a private appointment with me and we'll dig into what that new world looks like for you as things change. But getting back to the general reading being that there's a lot of change happening. There's change happening for students right now as they go back to school. There's change happening for adults as summer ends, as they return to work. I know that there are a lot of companies that allowed people to continue to work from home, for example, over the summer, and then called them all back in as the students went back tomorrow. Most people go back tomorrow. There's Labor Day weekend. But so that's a big change and a big shift and a big adjustment. So like I said, for some of you, going back into the office is like going back into a vessel that's familiar, yet unfamiliar, because a lot changed since you started working from home. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's this cycle and this rhythm, and yet things are different. And that's the same with the ocean, right? There's a cycle and a rhythm, and yet no two waves are identical. You can sit on the shore and you can listen to the waves and you can hear the rhythmic nature, and yet no two waves are identical, right? And yet the water adapts, the water changes, the water fits into its vessel or its container. So that's what you're being asked to do this week. Those of you that selected deck number 1 or selected the rose quartz. Let's have a look at what your shadow is this week. Okay. Air. I'm laughing very hard because it's so funny that you ended up with water and air. You ended up with 2 elements this week. The air being your shadow this week. Air, again, it's all around us. Air changes, however. Air is easily influenced by temperature, by wind, by us walking through it, whatever the case may be. Air is malleable, and yet it's always there. That's how we live. That's how everything on our planet lives, is these 2 elements. So air being in your shadow this week is an indication that you're kind of bumping into these, as I kind of alluded to already, you're bumping up against change, you're bumping up against rhythms, you're bumping up against cycles this week. So the air, like water, needs to flow. So you're being called upon to not quite be so rigid. I'm really getting a sense that for a lot of you that selected deck number 1, that there has been a rigidness in you, a resistance to change. And this week, you're being called upon to really, really pay attention to flow. Kind of going with the flow. Now, here's the thing. Going with the flow does not mean allowing yourself to be coerced, does not mean allowing yourself to be put in a situation that is making you uncomfortable. Don't ever allow that to happen. But what it does mean is that there's a give and a take and a flow that kind of goes through your activities this week. Kind of go with that flow. So, for example, let's say, for example, you're invited to go out for a business dinner. It doesn't sit really well with you, but you know that there could be some career advancement if you go out to that dinner. Do you go out for that dinner? Go with the flow, right? But if that dinner then turns into going to a bar and getting plastered, and that really doesn't sit well with you, don't allow yourself to be coerced into that, right? So it's about going with the flow while not allowing yourself to be forced into something that really doesn't make you comfortable. Okay. I could come up with a million examples, but I think that you get the general idea this week is, watch the rhythms, watch the tides, and pay attention to what's really, really going on around you this week as well. That's the other thing. That's the other message that I'm getting for you, is that air is all around us and we take that for granted. Don't take the air for granted this week. Don't take everything that you have for granted this week. Practice some gratitude as well this week. Okay. All right, let's move on to our messages for those of you that selected the Smoky Quartz, this nice little piece of Smoky Quartz here. So if you were drawn towards the Smoky Quartz this week, this is your guidance. Just a general overall theme for you to pay attention to this week. All right, there we go. Do you see how that card is kind of sticking up? We're going to use that card as your general overall theme this week. Ooh, the maturity card. Maturity. Let's hope that that is in focus for you. Okay. Take a really, really good look at this picture. So this picture is representing the feminine, the divine feminine. It's also representing the flower that is on her forehead is right in line with kind of in between, our third eye is right around here and our crown chakra is back up here. And that flower is in between. Sorry, I have a little frog in my throat. That flower is in between these two. So for some of you that watch my channel, you're in the process of attempting to awaken the third eye, cleanse that pineal gland, and really get into that place of really trusting your intuition. And sometimes that becomes all consuming because there's a desperation almost of wanting so badly to be psychic and wanting so badly to have that third eye open and to have that spiritual awakening that everybody talks about. And what can happen is that actually slows our growth. Growth needs to be fluid, and it needs to happen in its own time. We can't rush it. And when we let go of the attachment to what we are trying to achieve, when we're trying to achieve something, we go through like this. We're like, oh, I want that so bad. And we have these closed fists. What does a closed fist represent? What does a closed hand represent? It means that we're closed off. And so for those of you that were drawn towards this card is actually a card of letting go. For those of you that watch my channel regularly, you'll know that I don't subscribe to any specific faith. But there is a famous saying that just about everyone in the world, no matter which faith they align themselves with, and that is let go and let God. Okay, I don't necessarily align myself with God, but let go and let things roll, let things happen. And when that happens, then we can move into a place of greater maturity, and we can get out of holding on. Oh, I want my third eye to open. And when we do that, all of a sudden there is a shift from the concentration here to kind of up into here. And that's where there is shivers as I touched up in here. That's where there is a huge growth potential. In order for the third eye to open, we also have to have flow from the crown chakra, but we also have to have flow from the lower chakra regions as well. There has to be that flow. And what I'm sensing here is that for those of you that have this card this week, your guidance is to let go and let God, and don't just concentrate on opening and aligning one chakra. It's about opening all of them. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this card aligns more with the feminine energy. Now, I'm not talking about men and women, boys and girls here. I'm talking about feminine energy versus masculine energy. And do I really want to get into this? Okay. Everything is energy. Everything has its own vibration. And so when we talk about feminine energies, they vibrate at a certain resonance. They vibrate at a certain rate, which calls in other energies. Energies such as a more calm sort of energy, a calmer demeanor. What are some of the other feminine attributes? There's so many of them to pick from, but let's go with calm. Calm, concentration, the ability to kind of zero in on something and just get the job done and then move on from that. There's a flow involved in that. And that's kind of the energy that you're being called upon this week with this card, to help you move into that place of maturity, that place of growth, where the third eye is opening for many of you. But then there's also has to be that connection with the crown chakra, because the connection with the crown chakra allows for what's the word I'm looking for? The authentic use of the third eye. So this reading this week, is all over the place with this card for those of you that selected this one. But I really, really feel like for a lot of you this week, there is a maturity that's happening for you. There is growth that's happening for you this week. And it's that culmination of opening of the third eye, as well as moving into opening the crown chakra. The other thing I want to just point out, and I'm not sure whether the camera is focusing well enough, I think it is. You'll notice that the circle that is around the feminine head here, the feminine energy, is the snake eating its own tail. I don't know if you can see that. I hope you can. Oh, a little bird just landed right on my windowsill about 3 feet from my face. So this has the snake eating its own tail. So this is also a reminder to all of you who are in the process of attempting to get that third eye wide open, to get that pineal gland cleaned out, cleansed, and working optimally, that there is a cycle to everything. And for a lot of people that just jump right into psychic work, what they don't realize is that in order to be able to open the third eye, the other lower chakras need to be in alignment as well. That takes maturity. But also each of the chakras aligns with I'm really struggling for words today, aligns with a stage in your life. So when we're first born, it's our root chakra that we're working on, and we need to be well grounded. We need to be cared for in an unconditional way in order for that chakra to fully open, and so on all the way up. So there is a cycle, and those cycles run through our whole lives over and over and over again. And so what I'm sensing is that for some of you that selected the Smoky Quartz this week, that you're entering into a new cycle as you open the third eye and move into the crown chakra. Be forewarned that eventually you will move back into root chakra type work, right? Because we do that. It's like a fountain, right? We draw energy up from the earth through the root all the way up through, and then it bursts out through our crown, and then it trickles back down to Mother Earth, and we have to draw it all back up again. That's part of the maturity, is understanding this cycle as the snake comes around and eats its own tail. So let's try and do a recap of all of this. For those of you that have this card this week, part of what's happening for you is that you are moving out of the concentration of opening the third eye and moving into the realm of connecting with the crown chakra as well. But as you do so, recognize that it is a cycle that happens. You have been here once before, and allow yourself to go with the flow, but also tap into feminine energies this week. Yeah. You know what? I think maybe I'll write a blog later this week as well about the feminine energies, connecting with feminine energies versus connecting with masculine energies. And it's not that one is positive and one is negative or anything like that. It just means that certain energies are best used at different times in our lives. Okay. Your shadow this week, for those of you that selected this deck, is fighting. Interesting. Really, really interesting that you've gone from a card that has so much positivity and so much growth this week. This is your main theme this week. This is what can hold you back from achieving your maturity this week, right? And the reality is, we know that fighting is about the most immature thing you can do. There are other ways to handle things. So really, really interesting that fighting is your shadow this week. Make sure this week that you are not allowing yourself to be caught up in ridiculous dramas. That's really what fighting is about. Fighting is about your ego, your absolute necessity to be right and prove yourself right. You know what? You don't have to prove it to anyone except believe it in your own heart. If there is something that comes up for you this week where you feel yourself being drawn into the drama, where you have to prove yourself, that's your shadow this week. Don't allow yourself to get caught up in that. And here's the thing is, if you don't allow yourself to get caught up in the fighting, when you have the maturity to be able to just say, I don't have to prove myself to you, that's when this growth is really, really going to explode and take off for you. All right. So that is for those of you that selected deck number 2. Let's move on to deck number 3. For those of you that selected the crystal point. All right. Just going to move the deck over. All right. We need a card on top as guidance for, I don't know if you can see, when I went to put the card on, my thumb decided it didn't want to get out of the way. That's your card. The sun, enjoy success and happiness. All right, for those of you that selected deck number 3, this is your card and your guidance for this week. All right, enjoy success and happiness. This card in the traditional tarot is considered one of the most positive cards that you can get in the deck. It is all about sunshine, happiness, rainbows, and unicorns. It is all about positive energy. The other thing is that I am being asked to bring up for those of you that selected the crystal point this week is vitamin D. The sun is all about vitamin D. Now, for a lot of you that watch my channel, you are in the northern hemisphere that is now going into, we're only about 2 weeks away from the fall equinox. Our days are getting significantly shorter. I don't know if those of you that watch my channel have actually consciously recognized and acknowledged the shorter days and the shorter cycles that we're going into. Also, as many people return to school and return to offices, return to work, we're putting on a few more layers of clothes and we're spending a lot less time outside in the sun. So get outside and collect your vitamin D. Yes, you can take a vitamin D supplement if that's what you choose to do. But studies are now showing that we don't metabolize that vitamin D nearly as effectively as our bodies do in nature. So those of you who have deck number 3 this week, not only is your theme for the week success and happiness, but you're also being reminded this week to make sure that you are getting out and enjoying the sunshine. Enjoy those last vestiges of sun, as they say, as we move into the fall and the autumn. And for those of you that are in the southern hemisphere that are moving into summertime, you are also being reminded of the sun and her power, and being reminded to take a few precautions. Now, I'm not suggesting going out and slathering on tons and tons of sunscreen unless that's your thing. But you are being reminded, maybe put a hat on. Maybe when you go to the beach, don't sit there and bathe in the sun, but rather have an umbrella. You will still get your vitamin D, even if you're sitting under an umbrella. Okay. So Enjoy your success, enjoy your happiness this week. What else can we say? I mean, like I said, this card is a card about positivity. It's also a card of new beginnings. And as I mentioned, you know, a lot of people are going back to school, back to work right now. So there is that excitement and this new beginning that's happening for so many of you. So yeah, that's what you're being called to. There's not a lot I can add to this card, unlike the other cards that I pulled today, especially deck number 2, which was just a download of so much information for a general reading. And this one, there's not a lot to add. Enjoy success and happiness this week. All right, let's see what your shadow is this week. Those of you that have deck number 3. Winter, take care of your needs. Right. This makes sense. Okay. Take care of your needs. And you'll notice that this is a picture of the wolf. One of the things that the wolf represents for us is that a wolf is a pack animal. And yet, this card says take care of your needs. Isn't that counterintuitive? Not really, because if you want to be a member of a pack, if you want to be a member of a family, if you want to be a member of a group, you have to be in relatively good health, relatively good spirits. You have to bring something to that table. You have to bring something to that group. Positivity, whatever the case may be, you're bringing something into that group, which means that you need to be taking care of your own needs. The same way that a wolf pack cannot take care of a sick wolf. If that wolf is not taking care of itself, it gets left behind. And lone wolves typically don't do very well. So your shadow this week is a reminder that you need to take care of yourself. If you want to be able to enjoy success and happiness, if you want to have that opportunity to go out and enjoy the sun, then you have to be looking after yourself. So this being in the shadow position really means that you're not taking care of yourself. Maybe you're going out and getting sunburned. Maybe you're not getting enough vitamin D. And you're spending way too much time inside in front of a screen and not receiving all of that natural, healthy goodness from the sun. That's what I'm picking up for a lot of you, is that this week, unlike this card, which was for those that selected deck number 2, which was all about sort of the metaphysical and emotional development. For those of you that have deck number 3, this is more about physical care this week. So I'm just going to let that sink in for a minute. This is about physical care, looking after your body this week. Okay, I think that's about it. So thank you so much for joining me this week. I hope that the cards resonated with you and that you can go forth and keep the messages of the cards in the back of your mind and allow those messages to pop up and come up a couple of times this week. You know, if you find yourself being drawn into some kind of drama where, you know, the ego might get the best of you, keep in mind that if you want to move into this place of maturity, you can't allow yourself to be drawn in. For those of you that have this card this week, keep in mind that you need to look after yourself in order to be able to enjoy that success and happiness, right? Don't be neglecting your needs. And for those of you that, coming all the way back to the first card, for those of you that had this, remember to go with the flow this week. Don't fight it. Pay attention to cycles that are happening in your life, and then go with the flow. All right. For any of you that are interested in a personalized reading with me, please jump on over to intuitivebutterfly.com. Also, there's an Intuitive Butterfly page on Facebook, and I do have lots of openings for personalized readings coming up this week, September the 5th. Bye-bye. Thank you again for joining me this week.